We have Mr. Boyce, who I just want to say is not a member of our Legion, but he came out and was very enthusiastic about judging this competition. He's very knowledgeable on the Constitution. I'll give you some of his background. He was a commercial fisherman, newspaper advertising salesman for the Press of Atlantic City, real estate broker, a hotel and motel owner-operator, a restaurateur, a printer, inventor of a combination of ocean wave energy, converting electric power plant, and an electric self-charging ship. Owner and operator of Delmont Sawmill for 29 years. And he's been politically active for over 30 years. U.S. Constitution seminar instructor working with the Institute on the Constitution. Constitutional Convention chairman to stop a call for Article 5 convention in New Jersey. Active in the pro-life movement, radio talk show host, God and Country call-in show, publisher of Captain Taxpayer comic, keynote speaker for Tea Party groups throughout New Jersey, Constitution Party congressional candidate 2008 and 2010, Republican primary assembly candidate 2011. Mr. Peter Boyce.
Okay, I'm going to say a few words. I guess then you're going to announce who the winner was. First of all, I really thank the American Legion, for hosting this. This is absolutely what America needs. We can't defend what we don't understand. In 500 BC, a Chinese warlord general named Sun Tzu wrote a book called The Art of War. And to this day, it's the most authoritative treatise on the art of war that's ever been written. He makes several points in that book, and one point that he makes that I'm going to speak about is that if you know your enemy and know yourself, your victory is assured. But if you do not know your enemy and you do not know yourself, your destruction is inevitable. Now, not to speak about America's enemies, because we don't have time, but to speak about a knowledge of ourselves, knowledge is very much lacking. Thomas Jefferson said, "A nation that expects to be ignorant and free hopes for what never was and never will be." The prophet Hosea lamented, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Okay. When we pledged allegiance, if you go up, point I'm going to make, if you go up to 100 people off the street and ask them, these are high school, college graduates, what form of government do we have here in America? And if you try this, you'll see most people either get a blank look or they'll say democracy. And we just said the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the Republic. Republic. So the question is, what is a republic? The word republic is derived from the Latin res publica, res meaning thing, publica meaning public, the public thing, the law of the land, of the United States Constitution. Okay? And that's a law not to govern the people, but to govern the government. The sole purpose of the government is simply to protect our rights, not grant rights. The Declaration of Independence, right, which preceded our Constitution, could be considered as the true preamble of the Constitution, in that it set forth the bedrock philosophy, the bedrock principle that we're founded on. Okay? We hold these truths to be self-evident, no debate, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or property, and that governments are instituted among men to secure these rights. Meaning the sole purpose of government is just to protect our God-given rights, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So what it's saying is, one, there is a Creator. He gives us our rights. He grants us our rights, and that's why they're unalienable. We delegate some of that authority to form a government to protect those rights and nothing more. And then we codified that government with a Constitution. There's a quotation by Thomas Jefferson which says, enough said of confidence in man, but bind him down with the chains of the Constitution. Because they knew that like Lord Acton said, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That if men have power, and that power isn't limited, that it'll become a tyranny. So there's a twofold, it's kind of a dichotomy. On the one hand, they knew that people generally had a sinful nature and need some order, some control, some government to keep them from violating each other's God-given rights. But at the same time, they knew that people being elected into government have that same nature, and they need to be controlled. So they wrote the Constitution in such a way as to limit the government, limit it, one faction against the other, executive, legislative, judicial, right? And then checks and balances within those so that no one group can gain absolute authority, right? And then limit it in Article 1, Section 8 to just very narrowly defined functions. This is what you're going to do and nothing more. Just protect the rights. Everything else remains for the people and for the states. Right? So that's the fundamental thing to understand, is that the government doesn't grant us rights. It doesn't create rights. Right? That philosophy is the same philosophy that's the basis of the Soviet Constitution, the United Nations Charter, that government gives rights. What government gives, government can take away. Therefore, they're not unalienable. They're unalienable because God gives us our rights. That's the foundation that we're built upon. That's the foundation that's not being taught anymore in the schools. I might say I was talking to these guys. When the Supreme Court ruled to take the Ten Commandments off the walls of the schools across America, etched in stone in the room, in the chamber that they're sitting in, is Moses holding the Ten Commandments. The very first Supreme Court Justice of the United States, John Jay, was the founder of the American Bible Society. So we've come a long way from our foundation. America is slipping off its foundation. And part of the way that that's being done is that the very first item in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, all legislative powers are vested in the Congress of the United States, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. Well, if you know the algebra, if all legislative power is with the Congress, then how much is with the Supreme Court? None. How much is with the President and his executive orders and signing statements? None. But what's happened is that gradually, the Supreme Court, just as an example, the Supreme Court has ruled on cases. And the understanding throughout the law schools, the Constitution isn't taught. When they study the Constitution, they don't read, they never open it up. Law students never open it up. What they study is what the Supreme Court says about the Constitution. So what's happened is, as the courts, as the federal courts make rulings, then that essentially is becoming the law of the land that was never meant to be. The Constitution is the law of the land. And bit by bit by bit, court decisions that follow, that refer back to previous court decisions, instead of referring back to the original intent, the Constitution, gradually have changed America to the point where justices can sit in the Supreme Court and rule, oh, we need to take the Ten Commandments off the walls because they might influence children. We need to take the Bible out of the schools. We need to eliminate prayer from the schools. Yet these are all the things that the founders stood for. This is the foundation. This is what made America different than any other nation that's ever been, is that the sole purpose of government was to protect our God-given rights, and other than that, stay off our backs and out of our pockets, not micromanage our lives. What I'd like to do is provide you with information. When I was speaking with Pat, I've got a wealth of information. I said I teach Constitution courses. It's real solid information. I'd like to provide you with information to be able to prepare you for the next round. So even though if whichever one didn't win, they still have the opportunity next year, correct?
Right.
Okay. So whichever one of you didn't win, don't feel like, oh, that's it, all is lost, because you can prepare and win, not just on the state level, but you can win if you have the right information. The trick is having the right information. Keep learning. Keep learning. The future of America depends on your generation. I mean, it really does. It's what we have is precious. What we have is like a diamond. It's like an enormous diamond that each person has in the sense of their liberty and their freedom. And because we've all got it and we've never known anything but that, we all take it for granted. We don't realize how precious it is. We won't realize how precious it is until we lose it. And we're apt to lose it because people don't understand what it is. So keep learning. Don't be afraid to stand up with what you know. And when you see a political leader or whatever violating whatever portion of the Constitution, hold them to task. Our job as citizens, yes, is to vote, right? It's to vote, but it's not just casting a vote without knowing what you're voting for, without knowing, one, the moral integrity of the candidate, two, what the candidate stands for, not what they say, but what their voting record is. That really speaks to who they are. And then voting. Our duty as citizens is to hold them accountable, right? Government of the people, for the people, by the people. You know? It says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. In America, we are Caesar. We are Caesar. We empowered the government. They work for us. It's our job to hold them accountable. If you hire someone to be a maid in your house, okay, and you go to work and you expect, oh, they're going to clean the house, and you come back at the end of the day and you've got your plumbing all taken apart. And you didn't hire them for that. That's not their job description. And that's what's happening in Washington, is they're doing all kinds of things that are absolutely not authorized. We give foreign aid. We are broke. We are $14 trillion in debt. And we give foreign aid to every nation in the world except 3. We borrow money from communist China and then turn around and give them foreign aid. So what? They need to be held accountable. That $14 trillion debt is falling on your backs and his back. Here's an example. Come here, Luke. What's the First Amendment?
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances.
He could go on with the others.
Very good. We'll get back to the contestants here.
That information has to be passed on. You have to learn it, and you have to stand up for it, or America's going to go down. God bless you for your efforts.